This was Prime Minister Saad Hariri's highly anticipated return to Lebanon. Right on time for Independence Day celebrations. His mysterious two-week absence inspired a raft of conspiracy theories. Many Lebanese hope he'll now be able to put that speculation to rest. The reality so far is the story is getting more confusing.
I discussed today my resignation with the President of the Republic, who asked me to wait before submitting it and to put it on hold and allow for more consultations into the reasons behind it. I have accepted this request.
2 weeks ago, Saad Hariri disappeared, turned up in Riyadh, and then resigned as Lebanon's prime minister on live Saudi television. He said his life was in danger in Lebanon. The bizarre series of events captivated and confused audiences worldwide. More importantly, it ignited a political firestorm in Lebanon.
Our prime minister has been detained and arrested in Saudi Arabia.
It's clear the resignation was a Saudi decision imposed on the prime minister.
Lebanon's president, Michel Aoun, had refused to accept Hariri's resignation while he was still out of the country. It appears Aoun has been able to convince the prime minister to see things his way, at least for now. But as Hariri settles back in at home, the question on many minds is whether the drama of the past 2 weeks is over, and whether the current compromise will hold.
We are against Hezbollah's terrorism. We are against Hezbollah's involvement in the affairs of other countries. And we believe that Lebanon will not see peace and security until and unless Hezbollah disarms.
Lebanon's fortunes, for better or worse, have long been tied to its powerful neighbors. Saudi Arabia holds sway over Lebanon's economy and domestic politics. Hariri is under intense pressure from the Gulf Kingdom to curb the power of Hezbollah, which is backed by Iran. Hariri has echoed Saudi demands that Hezbollah's military wing disarm and pull out of conflicts in Syria and Iraq. He also needs to work with Hezbollah's legitimately elected officials in parliament. With the help of international mediators, there are signs of progress. Nevertheless, the political tightrope between Saudi Arabia and Iran is a difficult one to negotiate. Stepping off it is what many people believe led to Lebanon's current crisis. With the regional power struggle heating up, Lebanon's neighbors will be watching its next moves closely. The question is, what will they do when they see something they don't like? Basil Rehan, the Newsmakers.
Well, to discuss this, I'm joined now from Beirut by Bassem Shab. He's a member of the Lebanese parliament with Saad Hariri's Future Movement Party. We also have Middle East political commentator Halim Shibaya. And completing our panel is Noor Samaha. She's a journalist with a special focus on Lebanon and the region. I thank you all for joining us. Bassem Shab, what happened? Why the change of heart for the Prime Minister?
Well, it was not a change of heart for the minister only. Yesterday was Lebanon's Independence Day. It was a day of national unity. All political parties yesterday exhibited a will to cooperate, a will to engage in dialogue. And based on that, there was a move from the Prime Minister and the President, who have worked very well together in the past, to find a solution out of this impasse of the resignation, in which the resignation is temporarily suspended, which will permit the government to work normally and proceed with matters that are important for the Lebanese people and the economy, and at the same time address the issues that were behind the resignation, which is to maintain Lebanon's neutrality.
Okay. So
overall, the mood is up. Yeah, overall, the mood is upbeat.
Okay, so upbeat for you, Bassem. You don't see it as a change of heart. Noor, I mean, is that a reasonable interpretation of events? What happened to everything that he said when he left? He said that Iran is taking over the country, Hezbollah is running the place on behalf of Iran. My life is under threat. I can't do this anymore. Suddenly, everything's okay. I don't understand what's going on. Tell me, Noor.
I mean, I think I have to disagree a little bit with Bassem here. And I think that, as you pointed out, everything that he said at the beginning that contributed towards his resignation, which is we need to cut Iran's hand, it's not safe for me to come back to Lebanon, has suddenly changed in the last 2 weeks. And since he came back yesterday, I mean, he was walking around in the public. He clearly didn't seem to fear for his life. So unless that threat has magically disappeared, I think it, again, brings suspicion onto the reasons what forced his very, very abrupt resignation. And I think we need to look at the larger picture, which is this was a game, or this was a move that Saudi made to try and pressure Lebanon. And it's a move that didn't work and backfired. So now we're seeing, the way that at least I've interpreted it, is that Lebanon has managed to succeed in maintaining its stability at this point, and Saudi's going to have to reassess how it wants to deal with Lebanon from now on. OK, so Halim, is that how you see it? The Saudis gambled, and maybe Hariri was not in absolute control over his decisions, and the Saudi gamble backfired. Is that how you see it?
I mean, absolutely on one sense, but also a disclaimer in that we still till now haven't heard Prime Minister Hariri speak at length about what exactly happened to him on November 4 and subsequently for 2 weeks in Riyadh, where he was, you know, described in different words, but at least by the Lebanese president, it was said that he was detained in Saudi Arabia. And he said in his interview on November 12, he said that there are many secrets and he still has to discuss them with the president, but still for us as, you know, not members of his closest circle, we do not know exactly what happened. But having said that, I definitely agree a bit more with Noor in that this change of heart, as you termed it, was also caused by a rare display of national unity in Lebanon that basically had one voice coming out from Lebanon, except for a few fringe voices saying we want Saad Hariri back. So regardless of whether Lebanese liked Saad Hariri or they didn't like him, whether they agreed with his politics or not, the unified, so to speak, official position was that we want Saad Hariri back. And there were a lot of diplomatic efforts employed by President Aoun and by Foreign Minister Gebran Bassil, who also, even for their political critics, there was kind of a consensus that they really managed to have a good crisis management, so to speak, to de-escalate the situation and to lead the country and maybe in one way to force Saudi Arabia to change its course. And as we well know, the Minister of State for Gulf Affairs, Al-Sabhan, who became a household name and was tweeting a lot of aggressive tweets against Lebanon, he has been missing in action since November, I think since 10 days now. So I think there has been a recognition from Saudi Arabia that they should de-escalate and that and at least their strategy failed and they have to work in a different direction now. So
Bassem, I mean, is your leader just a pawn in this game between Saudi and Iran? And that's the long and the short of it?
No, I don't think so. I must say that now there is an emphasis on security for Lebanon not to descend into any civil conflict. There is an emphasis on national unity, which your other guests have touched upon. And there's also an emphasis on dealing with a situation that has caused a lot of problems for Lebanon as a state, which is Hezbollah's interference in affairs outside Lebanon. And clearly the Prime Minister had spoken and addressed all these issues, that we are for security, we are for stability, but part of that also is to assert Lebanon's neutrality. And I think one can say with some confidence that the other party also realizes that, and already they've made some concessions in engaging in dialogue and expressing a new mood, which we noticed in the speech of Mr. Hassan Nasrallah about the willingness of Hezbollah to withdraw from Iraq, and now the situation in Syria is being resolved, and also to address the situation in Yemen. This is not totally an internal affair. And that issue in particular, Hezbollah's involvement in Yemen, is something that has to be dealt with at one point.
Right, yeah, and we'll have to ask the Saudis if they still believe that Lebanon has declared war on it, because times might have changed in a week and a half or so. But Noor, is the ball now in Hezbollah's court? What do they do now?
I think actually Bassem summed it up pretty nicely in that you have noticed that Hezbollah has offered some sort of concessions or compromise, and in the tone of Hassan Nasrallah's speeches and the fact that he, said that they'd finished in Iraq and that they'll withdraw from there, and that he made a very a long speech about how they weren't involved in Yemen, or how they weren't, like they had nothing to do with the ballistic missile that was shot. So this is part of Hezbollah's strategy to temper the situation and to show that they are open for dialogue with Hariri. They've the last 3 speeches of Nasrallah have been very calm and have been encouraging to come back to the table and to bring the Prime Minister back. So I actually think that this puts the ball back into Saudi's court, because I think Lebanon has once again been able to overcome this, obviously with a lot of help from outside. I mean, we can't forget what the French and the Egyptians have done to resolve this situation, right, or at least temper it down. But I think that Hezbollah is aware of the situation and is aware of how quickly things can escalate. But they're also aware of the fact that the Saudis are playing a very reckless game. And as this last episode has shown, it hasn't actually put Hezbollah on the back foot, but possibly made them stronger than what they wanted. So the Saudis really have to pay attention as to how they want to play the next round.
Halim, has Lebanese sovereignty been strengthened in the past few days?
Absolutely not, because I think it was strengthened in the display of national unity that President Aoun and President Hariri and President Birri showed on Independence Day, and calling for Hariri to be back. But let's step back for a second and see that basically we had our Prime Minister resign in a shock resignation from Riyadh on Saudi state TV. And then today, just to also complete the picture, we had the chief of the Iranian Revolutionary Guards, who came out with a statement saying that Hezbollah's weapons are not up for discussion. So from both sides, we see a continuous assault on our independence by basically these pronouncements in different ways, in different forms. Some people will argue that, Iranian interference is more than Saudi interference, and others will say that they're the same. I think that kind of loses the debate. The point is, our politicians in Lebanon still unfortunately listen to either Iran or Saudi Arabia, and there are very few parties who really have independence in the country. And having said that, I kind of also agree with what Bassem said, that yes, I did mention that Saudi Arabia had to kind of backtrack a bit from its strategy, but also I think he's right in mentioning that now there is a big need to discuss, a great need to discuss Hezbollah's status, whether in the country or outside the country, because of course, it seems that Saudi Arabia has lost this small round of the battle now, but we forget that the Arab League Foreign Ministers meeting had quite a harsh statement against Hezbollah, and even there were talks about putting sanctions on Lebanon. This didn't take place, especially with Egyptian response to Foreign Minister Basil's diplomatic efforts. But also, we shouldn't forget that there's this regional dimension, but there's also an international dimension of Donald Trump's administration taking a hard line against Iran and also taking a hard line against Hezbollah. And just to mention briefly, you have the US Congress's sanctions. Every week, every month, we hear of new sanctions that are targeting Hezbollah. So I think Hezbollah it is in its interest to actually listen to the concerns of the future movement and to listen to the concerns of Saudi Arabia and the Arab countries. But of course, always noting that these concerns should not be voiced in the way they were voiced as threats, as trying to isolate Hezbollah or trying to use external powers to kind of try to push for something internally. I think there is a need for dialogue. There is a need for honest dialogue that we are not used to in Lebanon.
Yeah, and that's something that the Prime Minister has been talking about. He's back for dialogue. His resignation has been deferred for the moment. We'll be watching this closely to see what happens next. I've got to wrap and move on. It's been a pleasure talking to all of you. Halim Shabaya, Noor Samaha and Bassem Shab, thank you very much for joining us on the Newsmakers.